What comes to mind when you hear the word mafia? Is it images of sharp suits, dimly lit rooms, secret handshakes and whispered orders? Or is it the ruthless violence, bloody betrayals, and shocking crimes that have kept entire nations in fear? Whatever your answer, the truth is even darker. Mafia gangs aren't just criminals, they're shadow empires. Empires built on fear, corruption, and the merciless control of power. In this video, we'll explore the most brutal mafia gangs in history, their rise to power, the savage tactics they used to dominate their territories, and the horrifying legacies they left behind. From the birthplace of the mafia in Sicily to the bloody battlefields of Mexico's cartel wars, these gangs weren't just about money. They were about absolute control, no matter the cost. Some of these groups have faded into history, while others remain active today, still casting long, dark shadows over the societies they terrorize. This is their story. The Sicilian Mafia, Cosa Nostra. We begin our journey in Sicily, the birthplace of the Mafia. The Cosa Nostra, which translates to Our Thing, is one of the oldest and most notorious mafia organizations in history. Its origins are rooted in the 19th century, during a period of chaos and corruption in Sicily. But how did a loose network of rural enforcers grow into one of the most feared criminal empires in the world? Origins. Born in blood, Sicily in the 1800s was a land of lawlessness. Foreign rulers, whether Spanish, French, or Bourbon, exploited the island's resources, leaving its people impoverished and defenseless. In this power vacuum, local vigilante groups emerged, offering protection to wealthy landowners. These groups enforced their own rules, using violence and fear to maintain order. Over time, they evolved from protectors into predators. The Sicilian Mafia established themselves as the real rulers of the island, creating a parallel government. They controlled land, dictated who could farm, and taxed businesses through pizzo, or extortion money. By the late 19th century, their influence was so pervasive that even the Italian state couldn't operate without their approval. The Code of Omerta. The Cosa Nostra's most powerful weapon wasn't their guns or their knives. It was their code of silence, known as Omerta. Breaking this code was considered the ultimate betrayal, punishable by death. Omerta ensured that the mafia operated in the shadows, evading law enforcement for decades. This secrecy made them nearly untouchable. Victims of the mafia rarely sought justice. A shopkeeper who refused to pay protection money might find his business burned to the ground, or worse, his family targeted. Witnesses who dared to speak out often vanished without a trace. Fear wasn't just a tool for the mafia, it was their foundation. The First Mafia War. By the mid-20th century, the Cosa Nostra had become a global criminal empire, controlling not just Sicily but also large portions of the international heroin trade. But their quest for dominance led to internal conflicts, culminating in the First Mafia War of the early 1960s. Rival families fought for control over lucrative drug routes, and the violence spilled into the streets. Bombings, assassinations, and disappearances became daily occurrences. One chilling example was the disappearance of Emanuele Notarbartolo, a prominent banker and politician. He was abducted and murdered in 1893 after attempting to expose mafia corruption. His death marked one of the first times the mafia's brutality came to light. Salvatore the Beast Riina and the Corleonesi. The 1980s saw the rise of the most brutal mafia leader in history, Salvatore Toto Riina, also known as the Beast. Riina led the Corleonesi faction, which launched an all-out war against rival families and the Italian government. Under Riina's reign, over 1,000 people were killed in a campaign of terror. Journalists who reported on the mafia were assassinated, including the brave Giuseppe Fava. Anti-mafia judges Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino, who had dedicated their lives to dismantling the mafia, were killed in massive bomb attacks. These assassinations weren't just murders. They were declarations of war. Riina was eventually captured in 1993, but the scars of his reign remain. Today, while the Sicilian Mafia has weakened, They still operate in the shadows, their influence a chilling reminder of their bloody past. The Yakuza, Japan's criminal underworld. Next, we move to Japan, where the Yakuza have ruled the criminal underworld for centuries. Known for their full-body tattoos and strict hierarchies, the Yakuza are often romanticized as chivalrous outlaws. But don't let the image fool you. Behind the polished suits lies a history of violence and ruthlessness. Early beginnings, from peddlers to powerhouses, the Yakuza trace their origins to the 17th century during Japan's Edo period. They began as takiya peddlers and bakudo gamblers, marginalized groups who operated outside the law. Over time, these groups organized into clans, adopting strict codes of loyalty and discipline. By the 20th century, the Yakuza had become a major force in Japan's economy and politics. They controlled gambling, prostitution, and later expanded into construction, finance, and even real estate. Their influence reached such heights that they could sway elections and manipulate corporations. Brutality and rituals. While the Yakuza pride themselves on their sense of honor, their methods are anything but honorable. Turf wars between rival Yakuza clans often resulted in brutal massacres. Members who failed their bosses faced yubitsum, the ritual amputation of a finger. This punishment wasn't just painful, it was a permanent reminder of their failure. The Yakuza's most infamous act of violence occurred in 1980, during a turf war between the Yamaguchi-gumi and Ichiwakai factions. The streets of Osaka turned into a battlefield, with dozens of gangsters killed in broad daylight. Civilians were caught in the crossfire, sparking public outrage. Global expansion. In recent decades, the Yakuza have expanded beyond Japan, engaging in international drug trafficking, human smuggling, and cybercrime. Despite crackdowns by Japanese law enforcement, the Yakuza remain deeply entrenched in society, their influence visible in everything from business to politics. The Russian Mafia, brutality without borders. From Japan, we turn to Russia, where the collapse of the Soviet Union gave rise to one of the most violent and feared criminal organizations, the Russian Mafia. Vori v. Zakwan, thieves in law. The Russian Mafia's origins lie in the Soviet Union's prison system, where a criminal caste known as Vori v. Zakwan, thieves in law, developed their own code of conduct. These criminals lived by a strict set of rules, forbidding cooperation with the authorities and emphasizing loyalty to their gang. Post-Soviet chaos. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the resulting chaos allowed the Russian Mafia to thrive. They quickly took control of vital industries, from oil and gas to arms trafficking. Groups like the Sicilian Bratva became notorious for their brutality and global reach. The Russian Mafia's methods were shockingly violent. Public executions, torture, and even car bombings were used to eliminate rivals. In one infamous case, a rival gang leader was beaten to death with a metal pipe and left in the street as a warning. Pablo Escobar and the Medellin Cartel. Next, we move to Colombia, where Pablo Escobar built an empire of cocaine and blood. Escobar's Medellin Cartel wasn't just a criminal organization. It was a narco-terrorist army that left a trail of destruction across the Americas. Cocaine kingpin. At the height of his power, Escobar was smuggling 15 tons of cocaine into the United States every day. He earned billions of dollars annually, but his empire was built on violence. Judges, journalists, and even presidential candidates were killed under his orders. Acts of terror. Escobar's reign reached its peak of savagery in the late 1980s. One of his most infamous acts was the bombing of Avianca Flight 203, which killed 107 people. He also orchestrated the siege of the Colombian Supreme Court, resulting in the deaths of 94 people, including 11 justices. Escobar's death in 1993 marked the end of an era, but the damage he caused continues to haunt Colombia. Los Zetas, Mexico's most feared cartel. Finally, we reach Mexico, where Los Zetas set a new standard for brutality. Formed by ex-military operatives, Los Zetas became known for their extreme violence and public displays of terror, a legacy of fear. Los Zetas were infamous for their mass killings, public beheadings, and even posting videos of their crimes online. They didn't just kill, they made an example out of their victims. One of their most horrifying acts was the San Fernando Massacre, where they executed 193 migrants trying to cross the U.S. border. The victims were abducted, tortured, and killed in one of the most shocking displays of cartel violence. These mafia gangs represent the darkest corners of human ambition. Their stories are a chilling reminder of how power, when unchecked, can destroy lives and societies. While many of these organizations have been weakened or dismantled, their legacies live on, casting long shadows over the world they once ruled.